The governments have a deep interest in monitoring and controlling the internet, as it allows them to influence what people can see, say, and share online. Almost everything exists on the internet, and our conversations, opinions, and personal lives are all part of this digital world. However, it has also become filled with artificial trends, misinformation, and manipulated narratives. Governments around the world are entering a virtual competition to control the global network, aiming to exploit it for their own strategic interests. The methods they use include laws that make data collection easier, expand government authority, or restrict digital rights. In many countries, these are known as internet governance laws. They often require service providers to hand over customer information or allow authorities to punish content considered offensive. The definition of what is offensive is often decided by governments or legislative bodies themselves. Traditionally, this included information that creates discomfort for those currently in power. But the issue is not just the existence of these laws. The real problem is the ambiguity of terms like national security or the fight against terrorism. These broad definitions allow authorities to expand their power with limited judicial oversight. In many cases, laws that begin with legitimate objectives can become tools used to silence political opposition. Countries like Russia, Turkey, China, and Uganda have used these methods more openly. However, the trend exists almost everywhere, with only a few exceptions. Very few governments have openly opposed strict regulation of the internet. When the law is on your side, or when you can interpret it however you want, controlling the digital world becomes much easier. Metadata is a powerful tool that helps intelligence agencies monitor and analyze large-scale internet activity. Metadata reveals patterns, social trends, and movements, helping create detailed pictures of society. It can help anticipate behaviors, interests, or political affiliations without authorities ever reading a single message. A decade ago, the challenge was processing massive amounts of raw information, but metadata changed that. It now allows governments to monitor public sentiment, detect dissatisfaction, and make decisions that influence public opinion. It can also help identify illegal communities, hostile groups, or people expressing opposing views. Metadata can even be used to create artificial trends through automated accounts, bots, and coordinated campaigns. Governments and organizations in countries like the US, Russia, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia have been accused of using similar strategies. Private data is another controversial practice where governments access data stored by social media platforms and internet providers. This access can happen through laws that force companies to provide information or through less transparent methods. The result is a form of widespread surveillance that appears legal because it happens through third parties. The most concerning possibility is that in extreme cases, this could lead to the creation of massive individualized databases where every person is classified into different categories. Avoiding the internet completely does not necessarily solve the problem. Modern analytical systems can already predict who you are, what you believe, and even what you may do in the future based on your family connections, friends, digital environment. Methods that are extremely unpopular, but that are increasingly being used by governments around the world. Within this category, we find the great digital firewalls. The purpose of a firewall is simple: to prevent access to certain parts of the internet. This can include social networks controlled by foreign governments, websites considered illegal, or platforms that promote opinions considered harmful or unfavorable by authorities. In some situations, this can be useful. Blocking criminal networks, removing platforms dedicated to illegal activities, or restricting dangerous content can be considered a legitimate action in a society. But the problem begins when these same tools are used to silence political opposition, limit criticism, or weaken opinions that challenge those in power. Beyond simple blocking, these technologies have evolved into something much more advanced: deep packet inspection. This technique does not simply block websites. It analyzes internet traffic in real time. It can identify keywords, detect communication protocols, examine encrypted connections, and, in some cases, deliberately slow down specific applications that governments consider problematic. This is where the line between security and censorship becomes extremely controversial, because when these systems are used to control political expression, they become a direct threat to fundamental rights. This has contributed to the rise of virtual private networks, or VPNs, tools that allow users to bypass digital restrictions. However, some governments now view VPNs themselves as a threat. The Great Firewall of China remains one of the most famous examples of this type of internet control. Internet shutdowns. And now we reach the most extreme form of digital control: A complete internet shutdown. Almost every government either has this possibility prepared or is developing emergency plans to implement it if necessary. Inside national borders, this can be used to prevent citizens from accessing information that is not controlled by the government. It can also prevent information about the internal events from spreading quickly around the world. Internet shutdowns are usually justified with arguments such as maintaining public order, preventing the spread of misinformation, or stopping the organization of protests. However, in practice, they have often been used to silence opposition voices, prevent citizen organization, and control the official narrative. The economic impact of shutting down the internet is enormous. Trade, business, financial services, and entire industries can be severely affected. Because of this, shutdowns are usually temporary measures implemented during specific events or periods of instability. Internet blackouts represent one of the clearest and most visible forms of state control. Unlike more subtle methods such as surveillance or selective censorship, a shutdown makes the power relationship immediately obvious. It is a reminder that access to information and communication has become a fundamental right, one that can still be restricted during moments of political tension. And now many people ask, could someone shut down the internet worldwide? The answer is complicated. A complete global shutdown would be extremely difficult because the internet is not controlled by a single central system. However, powerful nations could potentially attempt large-scale disruptions, causing serious consequences around the world. The future of internet control, and now to finish, as the internet continues to grow and evolve, governments are also improving their methods for controlling information and using it to serve their own interests. Throughout human history, information and power have always been connected. Those who possess information and know how to manage it possess power. Today, control is no longer exercised only through direct prohibition. Instead, it increasingly happens through information management, digital noise, algorithmic influence, and the normalization of constant surveillance. The question is no longer simply, are you anonymous online? The real question is, are you considered a person of interest? Even an ordinary individual, for example, a small YouTuber with a modest audience who frequently criticizes different governments and questions the actions of those in power, could potentially become part of a much larger digital ecosystem of monitoring and analysis. One interesting detail is how public perception has changed over the years. Things that were once dismissed as paranoia are now openly discussed as technical realities. The tools exist, the technology exists, and the debate is no longer about whether these systems are possible, but about how they are used. But don't pay too much attention to me. These are probably just the consequences of living surrounded by electronic devices that seem to have a life of their own. Devices that turn on by themselves, try to connect with each other, start transferring data without being asked, or suddenly stop working even when everything appears to be physically correct.